market. All right. Oh, another thing to point out. In between each time we start a chapter or like one of the other things, I'm going to note for the YouTube viewers what this is. Because each of these are going to be a video. Just to give a heads up. So, um, yeah. So let's switch it up. I will respond when I can for sure. All right. Sorry, I'm nervous to hit this button. Bam. Let me mark it. Where is my screen marker? Marker added. Okay. So, for those who are watching the future, what we're doing is a throneathon. It's going to be a marathon focusing on my throne, but we're going to divide this up into like clips for YouTube later on. I just wanted to let you guys know. Perhaps someone's nice and got them for you. Maybe I missed it. Shoot, I'll have to check. Maybe you're right. Did I miss it? All right. So we're going to start with the epigraph. Along the shore the cloud waves break, the twin suns sink beneath the lake, the shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange in the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies, but stranger still is lost Carcosa. Songs that the Hyads shall sing, where flap the tatters of the king, must die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead. Die thou unsun as tears unshed, shall dry and die in lost Carcosa. Casilda's song in The King in Yellow, Act 1, Scene 2. Oh, shit. I can add those in second, King. I did take those off. I'm sorry. I should put them back on. Because I've been using the digital ones. Alright, so repairs of reputation. I am going to try to pronounce this. Do not judge me. Neuralians pas les fois liao folie dur plus longtemps que la noter voilà tout la difference. I have no clue. I do not speak French. I am sorry if I butchered that. For the end of the year 1920, the government of the United States had practically completed the program adopted during the last months of President Winthrop's administration. The country was apparently tranquil. Everybody knows how the tariffs and labor questions were settled. The war with Germany, incident on the country's seizure of the Samoan Islands, had left no visible scars upon the Republic, and the temporary occupation of Norfolk by the invading army had been forgotten in the joy over repeated naval victories, and the subsequent ridiculous plight of the General von Gauterlob's forces of the state of New Jersey. The Cuban and Hawaiian investments had paid 100%, and the territory of Samoa was well worth its cost as a coaling station. The country was in a superb state of defense. Wow, I can't read. Yeah, I'll add those on in a second. Every cost lost had been well supplied with land and fortification. The army, under the parental eye of the general staff, organized according to the Prussian system, had been increased to 300,000 men, with the territory reserves of millions and six magnificent squadrons of cruisers and battleships patrol the six stations of the navigational seas, leaving a steam reserve amply fitted to the control home waters. Really quickly, I'm going to give you guys a context here. This book was written in uh, this is an older book. King in Yellow was written in January 1st, 1895. Just to give you a quick idea, they're talking about war in Germany in 1920 and like all that kind of stuff. But this book takes place in their future. But yeah, 1895. Just to give you a heads up on that, okay? I wanted to clarify that because like the talking of like World War One, but how they're talking about World War One is a bit weird. Um, the gentleman from the West had a leaving, or the gentleman. Wow, where am I? The gentleman from the West had uh had at last been constrained to knowledge that college for the training of diplomats was as necessary as the law schools are for training of baristas or barristers. Wow, can't read. Uh, the training of barristers. Consequently, we were no longer represented abroad by uh, incompetent patriots. The nation was prosperous. Chicago, for a moment paralyzed after a second great fire, had risen from its ruins, white and imperial, and more beautiful than the white city which had been built for its playthings in 1893. Everywhere, good architecture had been replaced by bad, and even in New York, a sudden craving for decency had swept away a great portion of the existing horrors. Streets had been widened, properly paved, and lighted. Trees had been planted, squares laid out, elevated structures demolished, and underground roads built to replace them. The new government buildings and barracks were fine bits of architecture, and the long systems of stone quays, which buildings and barracks were, which completely surrounded the island, had been turned into parks, which proved a godsend to the population. The subsidizing of the state theater and state opera brought its own rewards. The United States National Academy of Design was much like Europe's or European institutions of the same kind. Um, Nobody envied the Secretary of Fine Arts, either his cabinet position or his portfolio. The Secretary of Forestry and Game Preservation had a much easier time thanks to the new systems of National Mounted Police. We had profited well by the latest treaties with France, England, and the exclusion of of foreign born. Wow. All right, we will skip that sentence. All right, I'd like to note this is a very old book. Basically saying excluding a certain group of people, foreign born people, as a measure of self preservation. This. All right, just to let you guys know, this is a blind read. I did not know that was coming. The settlement of a new independent um, state of. Ah, wow. Guys, I might not actually cut this. Settlement of a new independent black state of Swanee. I'm not saying the word they actually wrote there. The checking immigration, the new law concerning naturalization, the gradual centralization of power, and the executive all contribute to nation calm and prosperity. When the government solved the, I wish you guys could see me face palming. I am so sorry. One, there's like three sentences I've read. This is all like commas, but in this sentence describing the United States, yeah, I wasn't prepared for this. When the government solved their problem with indigenous, I'm going to put it that way, squadrons of indigenous cavalry scouts in native costume were substituted for the pitiable organizations tacked onto the tail of skeletonized regiments by a former Secretary of War. The nation drew a long sigh of relief. When after the colossal Congress of Religions, bigotry and intolerance were laid in the graves, not by that sentence. Oh, did I forget to turn chat? I'm sorry. Wait. Oh, leave one of the Lego kids is. Wait. Huh? I'm confused. I got confused. Bigotry and talents were laid in the graves, and kindness and charity began to draw warring sects together. Many through the millennium had arrived, at least in the New World, which, after all, is a world by itself. So I want to dissect this really quick. I really want to dissect this. I censored like 5 sentences that just straight up were racism. Like just straight freaking racism. Yeah, like no, like there were literally lines in there that I have I had to rephrase. Mind you, this book is like 140 years old. But at that point, though, that was pretty. And then he had the nerve to say all bigotry was gone after he said, and I'm going to quote the actual wording here, after he said the Indian problem. You know, after he referred to a separation to a separate state of Black Americans using a word, not the N word, but another word. After he referred to to foreign born, I kid you not, it's the foreign born Jews. It was like, what the hell? I said, this is a blind read. I'm trying my best to give the story without, you know, because this is speak go. Okay, all right, we're going to take a break from the thing in 1 minute. I will have to speak go for a minute. But yeah, I am sorry, guys. I didn't know like some of this was in the book. I am very sorry. But hey, cultist, how's it going? We're reading King in Yellow. I was not prepared for the racism in King in Yellow. And for the people on YouTube, when this gets clipped, just let you know there's a redeemed speaking goat, and that's about to happen. Maybe I should speak in goat in lines that like that. That was a really bad paragraph though. Like that paragraph was a whole page. Change form. But that requires me to resize everything. I want to stick with this form for a while. This is a really good bottle. Bah, 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 bah. All right, we got the minute in there. I was just worried about the sizing. I didn't know if it was going to size right. So understand this book did a few things historically for writing. This book is probably one of the most influential American horror novels of the last era. It introduced cosmic horror as a genre. Like this came before Lovecraft. Lovecraft was heavily inspired by it, and but the sizing, yeah. Oh my goodness, how you designed it? Okay, that makes sense. Um, but yeah, so like this book influenced Lovecraft in his writing, and the King of Yellow is actually part of Lovecraft's world. I knew Lovecraft was raging racist, but like, man, I didn't know H.W. Chambers was. But we're going to continue on. I'm just giving context to everyone. Let's. I will try my best to. But self-preservation is the first law, and the United States had to look on in helpless sorrow as Germany, Italy, Spain, and Belgium writhed into the throes of anarchy, while Russia, watching from the Caucasus, stooped and bound them one by one. In the city of New York, summer of 1899 was signaled by the dismantled elevated railroad. The summer of 1900 will live in memory of New York people for many cycles. The Dodge statue was removed that year, and followed the winter began that agitation for the repeal of laws prohibiting suicide while born the final fruit in the mouth of April 1920. The first government lethal chamber was opened in Washington State. Jeez. I know some of these stories are going to be good and some aren't too, just to give a heads up. I'm just reading them in order. I had walked down from, or I had walked down that day from Dr. Archer's house to Madison Avenue, where I had been, or as a mere formality, since ever since that fall from my horse 4 years ago or before. I had troubled at times with pains in the back of my neck and head, but now for months had been absent. And the doctor, sorry, the words are going into the binding, so I can't see all the words. And the doctor sent me away that day, saying that there was nothing more to be cured in me. It was hardly worth his fee to be told that. I knew it myself. Still, I had no grudge with him the money. What I minded was the mistake which he made first. When they picked me up from the pavement and I lay unconscious and somebody had mercifully sent a bullet through my horse's head, I was carried to Dr. Archer and he pronounced my brain affected, placed me in a private asylum where I was obliged to endure treatment for insanity. At last he decided that I was well, and I, knowing that my mind had always been sound as his, if not sounder, paid my tuition, as he jokingly called it, and left him and left. I told him, smiling, that I would get blah blah blah. That I would get even with him for his mistake. And he laughed heartily. He asked me to call once in a while. I did so, hoping for a chance to even up accounts, but he gave me none. And I told him I would wait. All right. The fall from my horse had fortunately left no evil results. On the contrary, it had changed my whole character for the better. From lazy young man about town, I had become active, energetic, temperate, and above all else, ambitious. There was only one thing which troubled me. I laughed at my own uneasiness, and it troubled me. Uh, during my convalescence, or during my convalescence, I had bought and read for the first time the Keenan Yellow. All right, so as a note, Keenan Yellow in this world is a play. I remember after finishing the first act that it occurred to me that I had better stop. I started up and flung the book into the fireplace, and the volume struck the barred gates and fell open on the hearth in the firelight. Sorry. Uh, if I had not caught a glimpse of the opening words in the second act, I should never finish. But as I stooped to pick it up, my eyes became riveted onto the page, and with a cry of terror, or perhaps it was the joys of so poignant that I suffered it in every nerve, I snatched the thing out of the coals and crept shaking it to my bedroom, where I read it and reread it, and wept and laughed and trembled with horror, which at times assails me. This is the thing that troubles me, for I cannot forget Carcosa, where black stars hang in the heavens, where the shadows of men's thoughts lengthen in the afternoon, when the twin suns sink into the lake of Hali, and my mind will bear forever the memory of the pallid mask. I pray God will curse the writer, and the writer has cursed the world with memory of with this beautiful, stupendous creation, terrible in the simplicity, irresistible in its truth, a world which now trembles before the Keenan Yellow. When the French government seized the translated copy, which had just arrived in Paris, London, of course became eager to read it. It is well known how the book spreads like an infectious disease. Oh, hey, Geek, thank you for showing yourself out. I'll let you know, Geek, there's going to be some subtle censorship of this book, we found out. All right. Thank you for the alert. Disease. From city to city, from continent to continent, barred out here, confiscated there, denounced by press and pulpit, censored even by the most advanced of literate anarchists. No definite principle had been violated in those wicked pages. No doctrine promulgated. No convictions outraged. It could not be judged by any known standard. Yet, although it was acknowledged that the supreme note of art had been struck in Keenan Yellow, all, all felt that human nature could not bear the strain, nor thrive on words in which the essence of purest poison lurked. The very banality and innocence of the first act only allowed the blow to fall afterwards with more awful effect. I looked away from the page too soon. Hope I'm making the reading fun for you. Duh, duh, duh. I was remembered the 13th day of April 1920 when the first government lethal chamber was established on the south side of Washington Square between Wooster Street and South Fifth Avenue. The block, which had formerly consisted of a lot of shabby old buildings used as a cafe and restaurants for foreigners, had been acquired by the government in winter of 1898. The French and Italian cafes and restaurants were torn down. The whole block was enclosed by a gilded iron railing and converted into a lovely garden with lawns and flowers and fountains. In the center of the garden stood a small white building, severely classical architecture and surrounded by thickets of flowers. 6 ionic columns supported the roof. Thank you for the 1312 geek roof, and a single door of bronze, splendid marble groups of fate stood before the door, a work of young American sculptors Boris Ivan, who had died in Paris when he was only 23 years old. Thank you, geek, so very much. Sorry, I was in the middle of that sentence on that. All right, so again, for context, thank you, geek. I will adjust that actually in Stream Elements. Let's make sure I got everything. I'm going to adjust that in Stream Elements really quick. Get your face. And then we'll get back to the reading. So, just to inform you, geek, as we started, we're only a couple pages in, but the book is a bit, we'll say old school. But the book was written in 1895. So he's predicting a lot of what he thinks the future of America will be. And he is saying in some ways that are not polite, we'll put it. But yeah, sorry. Give me a second. Sorry, guys. A bunch of things going on at once. May ask me something. All right, so okay, King. I'm going to continue the reading. The inauguration ceremonies were in progress as I crossed the University Place and entered the square. I threaded my way through the silent throng of spectators, but as I stopped at 4th Street by a cordon of police, cordon of police, a regiment of United States Lancers were drawn up in a hollow square round the lethal chamber. On a raised tribune facing Washington Park stood the governor of New York, and behind him were groups of the mayor of New York and Brooklyn. The Inspector General of Police, the commandant of the state troops, Colonel Livingston, military aide to the President of the United States, General Blount, commanding at Governor's Island, Major General Hamilton, commanding the garrison of New York and Brooklyn, Admiral Buffby of the fleet in the North River, Surgeon General Lansford, and staff of the National Free Hospital, Senator Wise, and Franklin of New York, and the Commissioner of Public Works. The tribune was surrounded by a squadron of hussars of the National Guard. Okay, the governor was finished his reply in the short speech of Surgeon General. I heard him say the laws prohibit suicide and providing punishment for any attempts at self-destruction have been repealed. The government has seen fit to acknowledge the right of man to end an existence which may have become intolerable to him through physical suffering or mental despair. It is believed that the community would be benefited by the removal of such people in the midst. Since the passage of this law, the number of suicides in the United States has not increased. Now, the passage of law, the number of government has determined to establish lethal chamber in every city, town, and village in the country. It remains to be seen whether or not the class of human creatures from whose despondent ranks New victims of self-destruction fall daily will accept the relief thus provided. He paused and turned to the white lethal chamber. The silence in the street was absolute. Their painless deaths turn to the white lethal awaits him who can no longer bear the sorrows of life. If death is welcome, let him seek it there. Then quickly turning to the military aide of the president's household, he said, I declare the lethal chamber open. And again, facing the vast crowd, he cried in a clear voice, citizens of New York and of the United States of America, let, or through me, the government declares lethal chambers to be open. Um, Solemn hush broke by a sharp cry of command. The squadron of hussars filed after the governor's carriage. The lancers wheeled and formed along the Fifth Avenue to wait for the command of the garrison, and the mounted police followed them. I left the crowd to gape and stare at the white marble death chamber. And crossing South Fifth Avenue, I walked along the western side of that thoroughfare to Bleecker Street. Then I turned right, stopped before a dingy shop which bore the sign Halbert Armor. Yeah, we're not even to part two of the first story. I glanced in the doorway and I saw Halbert busy in his little shop at the end of the hall. He looked up and, catching sight of me, cried in his deep, hearty voice, "Come in, Mister Cassian. Casting. Come in, Mister Casting." All right, it said blind read. Constance, the stouter, rose to meet me as I crossed the threshold and held out her pretty hand. But I saw the blush of disappointment on her cheek and knew it was another Castaigne she had expected, my cousin Louise. I smiled at her her confusion and complimented her on her banner. Uh, on her banner, she was embroidering from a colored plate. Old Hawberk sat riveted and worn greaves of some ancient suit of armor, and the ting 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 of his little hammer sounded pleasantly in the quaint shop. Presently, he dropped his hammer and fussed about for a moment with a tiny wrench. The soft, the soft clash of the nails sent thrill of pleasure through me. I love to hear the music of steel brushing against steel, the mellow shock of the mallet on thigh pieces, diggity, and the jingle of chain armor. That was the only reason I went to see Halbert. He had never interested me personally, nor did Constance, except for the fact of her being in love with Louis, pardon me. This did not occupy my attention, and it sometimes even kept me awake at night. Or this did occupy my attention, sometimes even kept me awake at night. Wow, I read that horribly. But I knew in my heart that all would come right and that I would arrange their future, as I expected to arrange that kind of doctor, John Archer. However, I should never have troubled myself about the visit or about visiting them just then, had it not been, as I said, the music of the tinkling of hammer had for me this strong fascination. I would sit for hours, listening and listening, and then my stray sunbeam stuck inlaid steel, the sensation it gave me was almost too keen to endure. Oh, give me a second. Sorry. My phone just kept on going off. All right. My eyes would become fixed, dilated with a pleasure that stretched every nerve among the uh, nerve almost to breaking until some movement of old armor cut off the ray of sunlight. Then, still thrilling secretly, I leaned back and listened again to the sound of polishing rag. Swish, swish, rubbing rust from rivets. Constance worked with an embroidery over her knee, now in the pausing examining more closely the pattern in color for the plate of Metropolitan Museum. Who is this for? I asked. Halbert explained. That, in addition to the treasure of armor in the Metropolitan Museum, of which he had been appointed armor, he also had charge of several collections belonging to rich amateurs. This was the missing greave of a famous suit which a client of his had traced to the little shop in Paris on the Quai d'Orsay. Quai, Quai d'Orsay? I don't know how to. If pronounce French shit horribly, I am sorry. Please forgive me. Um, he halt He, Hallberg, had negotiated for the secure the grievance, and now the suit was complete. He laid down his hammer and read me the history of the suit, traced since 1450, from owner to owner until it was acquired by Thomas Stainbridge. When his superb collection was sold, the client of Hallberg's bought the suit, and since then, the search for the missing grieve had been pushed until it was almost by accident okay in Paris. Did you continue the search so persistently without any certainty of the grief being still in existence? I demanded. Of course, he replied coolly. Then for the first time, I took a personal interest in Halbert. It's, it was worth something to you, I ventured. No, he replied, laughing. My pleasure in finding it was my reward. Having no ambition to be rich? I asked, smiling. My one ambition is to be the best armor in the world, he said gravely. Constance asked me if I had seen the ceremonies at Lethal Chamber. She herself had noticed the cavalry passing up Broadway that morning, and had wished to see the inauguration, but her father wanted the banner finished, and she had stayed at his request. Did you see it, or see your cousin, Mr. Castaigne, there? She asked with a slight tremor of her soft eyelashes. No, I replied carelessly. Lewis Regiment is maneuvering out in Westchester County. I rose and picked up my hat and cane. I'm sorry if I'm stumbling over words already. Are you going upstairs to see the lunatic again? Laughed old Hallberg. If Hallberg knew how I loathe the word lunatic, he would never use it in my presence. It rouses certain feelings within me, which I do not care to explain. However, I answered in quiet. I think I shall drop in and see Mr. Wilde for a moment or two. Okay, I have to. I have to approach this. They say some racist ass shit in the first paragraph, but multiple times goes back and talks about ableism. It's like, come on, dude. Come on. You know? Like, seriously. Like, he brings up ableism twice, which is interesting. One of them from the doctor, and then one from the character's friend. But man, he says some racist ass shit in the beginning, or the first paragraph. Like, I'm sorry. I think I deserve a little bit of a burst on that one. Poor fellow, Constance, with a shake of the head. It must be hard to live alone year after year, poor, crippled, and almost demented. It's very good to be Mr. Castaigne, to visit him as often as you do. I think he is vicious, observed Halbert, beginning again with a hammer. I listened to his golden tinkle on the grieve plate. Uh, when he had finished, I replied, No, he's not vicious, nor is he in the least demented. His mind is a wonder chamber from which he can extract treasures that you and I would give years of our lives to acquire. Halbert laughed. I continued a little impatiently. He knows history as no one else could know it. Nothing, however trivial, escapes his search, and his memory is so absolute, so precise to details, that were it known in New York that such a man existed, people could not honor him enough. Nonsense, muttered Halbert, searching on the floor for a fallen rivet. It is nonsense, I asked. Or is it nonsense? I asked, managing to suppress what I felt. Is it nonsense when he says that the tassets and cuissards of the enameled suit of armor commonly known as princes emblazoned can be found among mass of rusty theatrical properties of broken stoves and rag pickers refused in a garret in Pell Street? Halberg's hammer fell to the ground, but he picked it up and asked with a great deal of calm how I knew that the tassets and left cuissards were missing from the Princess Emblazoned. I did not know, I did not know until Mr. Wilde mentioned it to me the other day. He said that they were in the garret of 998 Pell Street. Nonsense, he cried. But I noticed his hands trembling under his leathern apron. Is this nonsense too? I asked pleasantly. Is it nonsense when Mr. Wilde continually speaks of you as the Marquis of Avonshire and Miss Constance? I did not finish, for Constance had started to her feet with a terror written in every feature. Halberg looked at me and slowly smoothed his leathern apron. That is impossible, he observed. Mr. Wilde may know a great number of things. About armor, for instance, and Princess Emblazoned, I interposed, smiling. Yes, he continued slowly. About armor, also. Maybe, but he is wrong in regards to the Marquis of Avonshire, who, as you know, killed his wife, his wife's traducer years ago, went to Australia, where he did not long survive his wife. Whew. Mr. Wilde is wrong, murmured Constance. Her lips were blanched, but her voice was sweet and calm. Let us agree, if you please, that in this one circumstance, Mr. Wilde is wrong, I said. That's actually really kind of interesting. Yeah, like, we got a few more pages in this story. A lot more pages. Going to take a quick drink break. All right, so what I'm learning about the author here as I'm reading. The author is very strongly about mental health, actually, which kind of surprises me for cosmic horror. Like, it really surprises me for cosmic horror because, like, cosmic horror tends to border on ableism a lot of times. A lot of the old cosmic horror is racist. That's why I was surprised with C.W. Chambers because this kind of King Yellow kind of marks the end of classical American horror before we start seeing things like Poe, before we start seeing things like or Poe and Lovecraft. Like, he was kind of the influence to Lovecraft, as I mentioned. Um, and that was just, man. But like, as far once you got away from those details, it wasn't bad. Now, mind you, a lot of these rotate around the idea of a truth. That if we knew the truth, it would drive us mad. The idea of the truth is enough to drive men mad. That's that in itself is an idea of, queerphobia, ableism, stuff like that. Like, that's something we see pop up in the concepts of what's wrong with old cosmic horror. But at that, I am going to continue to part two. We're going to continue on. The first part was 7 pages long. Part two is